Australia, beating Filipino Leo Zulita. The former peasant boy from Calabria, Italy, grew up in Sydney's western suburbs in the 50s, at a time when racism against migrants was rife. His name? Rocky Gattelari, and he had no choice but to handle the racist barbs his own way.
One thing I did learn, my first day at school, Rachel, at St. John's Park, is that if you fought the boys that were picking on you, and you beat the shit out of them, they respected you. So I suppose they did me a favour. They taught me how to fight.
Life was tough for a dirt-poor family in a new land, and Rocky was eager to make some cash. To win a place in the Australian team for Rome, Rocky had to beat this bloke, Jackie Bruce, who he KO'd twice after turning professional. The Rock was tough, fast and clever, and the crowds flocked to see him, but they weren't all admirers.
The Italians would cheer, but the majority would still be the Australians. The boos would just take over. If you remember the old Sydney Stadium, it was just like an aeroplane. Ooh! And I remember walk into the arena and look around. I raise my hand and jump around and say good evening, everybody. And the boos and some of the guys, they do all day, you know.
In essence, the Italians loved The Rock, but the Australians turned up to see him get rolled. Time and time again they were disappointed, as Gattelari put together 16 straight professional victories. Fred Hennebury was the ref here when he bombed out the Scottish champ Danny Lee. And Rocky won 3 fiery battles with this little bulldog, Ray Perez, an American who roughed up the world's best and even beat a hot prospect from Victoria by the name of Lionel Rose.
He gave me some of the toughest fights I've had. But the second fight that I fought him, the second time I fought him in Melbourne, and that was again one of my best performances. I knocked him out in 5 rounds.
At the same time Ray Perez was taking on all comers in a new country, Ralph Dupar was too.
While Scott waits in the hope of letting go that one big punch again, Dupar moves in.
Dupar, trained in Australia by a master tactician in Snowy Robbins, beat George Barnes in 1960 and here whipped Charlie Scott.
Right to the jaw. They believe it Caldwell watchers as Scott gets some advice and Dupar takes it easy. Scott's weary, reduced a little more than a punching bag in these closing stages, and Dupar is far ahead on points.
In this fight, Dupar outmaneuvered Rudel Stitch, a leading welterweight, and back in New Orleans won the World Junior Middleweight title from Denny Moyer in 1963. Dupar was world champ until Italy's rugged-looking Sandro Mazzini kicked his backside in Milan, and in this rematch in Sydney, Vic Patrick got to referee his first world title fight. Mazzini walked through Dupar in the 13th round. In 1964, the magnificently muscled Emil Griffith came to town to fight Dupar, who was on the receiving end of another hammering. Amid all the excitement, Rocky Gattelari in 1965 signed to fight another Italian, Salvatore Baruni, for the world flyweight title. Rocky's manager, Vic Fiorelli.
I feel Rocky's youth, and if we concentrate on speed for this fight and don't let Rocky box with anyone above the featherweight division, absolute maximum, well then I feel that Rocky's speed will give him a great chance of winning this contest.
The purpose was long-term. The world title.
But Rocky's hopes had taken a body blow.
I happened to commit a crime in my training camp at Douglas Park, 6 weeks before the title fight. I broke my hand.
That same year, 1965, the Menzies government elected to send the 1st Battalion of Australian troops to Vietnam. Conscription was to become a reality, sparking national protests that divided the nation. And in November, the man destined to be known as the Cup's King, Bart Cummings, won his first Melbourne Cup with light fingers. 1 month later, a massive crowd of 30,000 was at the Sydney Showground to see Gattelari do battle with Baruni.
almost helpless. Landing at will.
With his crook hand, Gattelari boxed bravely for 12 rounds, but by the 13th, bravery wasn't enough.
The punches, but can he administer a knockout punch? And Gattelari going down again for the third time, and he looks to be out. Yes, the referee has called the fight over.
Despite the loss, Rocky was eager to try again. He scored 5 more wins and then met a young fighter destined for greatness. Lionel Rose grew up in a dirt floor humpy and at the tender age of 10 was hooked on boxing when he saw George Bracken fight at Melbourne's Town Hall. He became Bracken's biggest fan and remembers the excitement he felt when a charity organisation brought him from the little Gippsland town of Druin to see his hero in action.
George Bracken is my idol, George Bracken. But for George Bracken, I'd never ever started boxing. I saw George fight when I was 10 years old. And well, he's devastating.
And I had a good yarn to him in the dressing room while I was getting dressed and that. And he was there tenderly looking at everything, you know, and saying, oh, what's going on here and what's there. And we got talking and I was showing him a few moves and what to do and all this sort of thing, you know. And I fell in love with him.
At age 14, Lionel left school and a year later walked into a youth club at Warragul and began training with Frank Oakes. But Lionel really flourished when he moved to Melbourne to train with Jack Rennie, who once fought the main supporting bout to a battle between the master boxers Archie Kemp and Rudy Cruz. Jack's tiny backyard gym in Essendon, Melbourne, has been turning out champs since 1958, from a string of African imports to Lionel's cousin Harry Hayes and to stars of the 80s and 90s like Graham Brook and Jimmy Thunder. Rennie had no idea that 4 years after meeting Lionel, he'd be training the first Aboriginal world champ. Early victories over such fighters as Jackie Bruce, Queenslander Noel Kundi for the Australian bantamweight title, and 2 victories in 3 fights with Ray Perez propelled him into battle with Rocky Gattelari. On December the 11th, 1967, the pair put on the most eagerly awaited fight at the Sydney Stadium since Patrick and Burns. Appropriately, Patrick was the referee. Gattelari was challenging Rose for his bantamweight title. Channel 7 pulled out all stops to make it a huge television event. Australia's boxing doyen, Ron Casey, was the commentator.
That fight, of course, had something of great interest to me as a broadcaster because it was the first bout that was ever relayed interstate on television. We used the coaxial cable for the first time for a boxing bout. And, of course, it drew in an audience, a huge audience in Melbourne.
The press built the fight into the grudge match of the century, something neither fighter was complaining about.
I was there at 4:30 in the afternoon. I'd bring up to King's Cross in Darling Hill, Australia. That was you know, for what they said in the media, well, it must have been good because they all turned out for the fight. It does it all out of top, I think.
Lionel's master trainer Jack Rennie planned his attack to perfection. Rocky took an horrific beating. Again, round 13 was bad news. He was knocked down twice. Lionel Rose was still the Australian bantamweight champion. The Rock departed the stadium on a stretcher. At St Vincent's Hospital, there were fears for Rocky's health. The press were hungry. Their first target, Vic Patrick.
About why you didn't stop the fight when Gattelari went down the first time in the 13th round. Would you care to tell us why?
Yes, there was no reason to stop it because Gattelari was quite... had his faculties in order and he was quite all right, and he nodded to me for a second. I nodded to him, he nodded back, and we continued to fight.
In your opinion, he was okay at that stage?
Yes, no times was he distressed.
Well, he ended up in a very distressed state. Gone for rest.
When Rocky emerged smiling, the news hounds hit him faster than Rose had.
You don't think you've got a big enough party to give it up?
Rocky had just one more fight before retiring, but made an absurd comeback in 1979 against another of Rennie's fighters, Paul Ferreri. The Rock quit after 3 rounds. In his prime, he would never have given up so easily. Rose was big news after beating Gattelari, a victory that resulted in an invitation to fight for the World Bantamweight Championship. His opponent, Japan's Fighting Harada, who, at 24, had already won the world flyweight and bantamweight titles. Lionel recalls how he adapted to world championship pressure.
We sent our spies into their gym and they sent them into ours to see what sort of tactics and stuff like that. Everything's... you do things like that. Anyhow, the word was out there that Harada is a charger. He's going to charge. That's his style of fighting.
In the opening round, Harada's characteristic charge is anticipated by the Australian, who blocks many of the blows and, making full use of his marked height and reach advantage, counters effectively.
For Lionel Rose, the purse was a small one, $7,500, as compared to Harada's $70,000. But it was the chance of a lifetime. Rose was understandably the underdog at 4-1. Yet, showing all the coolness of a 105 veteran rather than a 19-year-old, Rose sidestepped the relentless kamikaze attack of a strong and fearless champion.
Although losing balance himself, Rose's explosive right hand to the jaw sends the champion down in the ninth for a compulsory 8 count. Harada seems to dispute the knockdown and quickly recovers. Persistently trying to get inside, Harada is matched at close quarters by his opponent as the pace shows no signs of slackening. There's many fierce exchanges as Harada strives to keep Rose within punching range, but the confident challenger stands his ground. It's the 15th and final round. Harada makes a desperate bid to save his title, pressing Rose to the ropes, but the Australian dances into the safer open spaces of the ring. Harada keeps throwing plenty of punches, but Rose is more accurate and seizes upon the slightest openings. Although living up to his nickname of Fighting Harada, the gallant champion is unable to upset the composure of Rose, who punches with him until the bell. Judges' scorecards are checked, and as the referee Toyama signals Rose the winner, he and Jack Rennie crash to the floor in excitement. Rose becomes only the second Australian to take a world boxing crown and the first Aboriginal to win a world title.
We had 4 Japanese officials, not like today where you get neutral officials. So I had to trust in their honesty, and to be honest here, I was hoping they didn't read the Australian newspapers because they were saying we get robbed, these Japanese, because it wasn't all that long after the war, and we didn't know whether they were still quick on us or not. However, they all voted for Lionel, and it was a good close fight, but he was a good winner.
In his laid-back way, Lionel had reached the high point of his life. Upon his return to Melbourne, Lionel Rose was feted like a conquering hero. Melbourne has not seen a reception like it since. 200,000 people lined the streets to cheer him, and he was named Australian of the Year. Lionel went back to Jack Rennie's house and prepared to meet Tokyo's Olympic gold medalist Takeo Sakurai for $40,000. Things almost came unstuck early.
Rose.
But if Lionel found Sakurai a handful, the Mexican Choo-Choo Castillo was going to be a nightmare when they clashed in Los Angeles in 1968. Castillo had 14,000 Mexicans in his corner.
A hard right hand by Castillo, and Lionel down. 4, 5, 6. He is up.
Lionel got back on his feet to outpoint Castillo, and the Mexicans reacted to the decision like it was a crook taco.
I believe that was Lionel's best fight ever. When the decision came, which was split, the referee gave it to Castillo, the 2 judges to Lionel. There was just bedlam broke out, and we're lucky to be talking to you because it was on for young and old, and they weren't worrying about any other Mexican. It was only us though after, and the bottles were coming down.
Lionel's last successful title defence fittingly came before fans in Melbourne against Liverpudlian Alan Rudkin. The bout drew all the big names as Rose boxed cleverly for 15 rounds, winning on a split decision. At the time, he complained about the toll hard fights were taking.